Hello, it's the Great Canadian Bagel here coming to you with the next video in the Election Systems series. Today, we are here with single transferable vote, which is very possibly going to be the most complicated system I'm going to cover. Now, I'm sure since the size of my channel, at least at the point of posting this, that a lot of the people watching this have probably seen other videos discussing it, so maybe not seem as complicated to them, but just think back to the first time you've seen how STV actually works. It's not the most straightforward system. Everything makes sense. There's just a lot of steps. So we're gonna go through right here. So how does it work? So each district has K winners. Typically 5 is the rule of thumb. Sometimes people can go as low as 3 and as high as 7. Though I've not seen, or the general accepted idea is you want to have like 5 like the best compromise, because if it's too small, it becomes very vulnerable to gerrymandering, which single transferable vote's one of the purposes of it is just trying to mitigate the vulnerability to gerrymandering. And if you start going up as high as 7, 9, or more, you start getting into just ludicrous levels of candidates. I mean, already at 5, you have ludicrous numbers of candidates in ridings. But the more you get, the more ludicrous it is. So, with those K winners, you then get a vote share quota, which is 1 over K times 100%. So in case of 5, 20%, you need 20% of votes to become a winner. Now, every voter, they get 1 vote, and every voter ranks as many candidates as they want from 1 to n. So, i.e., if there's 5 people, you can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 1, or 1, 2, 3, etc. Then, on election day, or when they count the votes, you check to see if any candidate crosses the quota, and if they cross the quota, it's a bit of a tongue twister, you redistribute their surplus votes proportionally. So if the quota is 20% and they got 30% of the vote, you look at their second choice or the next choice on all of their ballots, and then you take that 10% and then you just split it up proportionally among the second choices. So that's the most common way that I've seen, though there's many others. This is like not a guaranteed process. Some do straight random sampling, which technically does the same thing, given a large enough sample size. There's a couple others too, I can't think of them all, but there's a lot of different methods of redistribution of surplus votes. Then after you've redistributed all surplus votes, if you still do not have K winners, you go to the next step, where the candidate with the fewest votes is removed, and their voters are redistributed to their next choice. And you just keep repeating. I have steps 3 and 4 here, but it's actually steps 5 or 4 and 5. My mistake. You keep repeating this until there's only K candidates left, and those automatically win, regardless of if the last candidates actually cross the threshold, because your ballots can get exhausted. So if you had, let's say, 100 voters and 10 candidates, but after 5 candidates are eliminated, you only have actually 70 voters left, because every other the other 30 ballots have been exhausted. You're going to have candidates who don't actually meet 20%, but they are just the 5th most popular. They just haven't met the quota, if that makes sense. So we're going to run through a sample election here, because I'm sure the people who've seen this before understand what I'm talking about, but for anyone who has not encountered STV before, this is not... It seems really complicated, and it is, frankly, it's the most complicated system I've covered so far, and possibly will ever cover, at least counting-wise, and not necessarily intuitive, so we're going to do a sample election just to help this answer out. Now, I will note a couple things here. We're doing a 3-winner district, just for simplicity's sake, and we only have 6 candidates to consider. In reality, at a 3-winner district in most political systems I've seen, by political systems or party systems I've seen in real countries, you'd probably have like 50 candidates here. maybe 40. But we're simplifying it down. That's the only thing we're simplifying. We're just reducing the number of winners and the number of candidates you'd actually have. That's the only thing I'm simplifying. So, actually, we're gonna go back here. So at the start, our threshold is 33%, and none of the candidates reach it. So since nobody reaches it, Don, who has the least votes, I believe 3.5%? I don't remember. Don has some quantity of votes. Doesn't particularly matter, so he's eliminated. And Don's voters go to his second choice. Here, Don's voters have been distributed to the second choice. As you can see, a lot of them preferred Amy, some preferred Ron, some preferred Kim, and some preferred Bob. Nobody has crossed the threshold, so the next candidate is eliminated, and this happens to be Bob here. So the Bob voters for Bob are distributed to the second choice, and the Don voters for Bob are now put to their third choice. And then we get this. So some of the Bob voters just stopped voting. They only voted Bob, and then their ballots exhausted. The rest of them voted for Jim as second choice, and the Don voters who voted for Bob are now voting for Jim as well as a third choice. So here, Jim now has passed the threshold, so Jim is a winner, but since he has more than 33% of the vote, his vote is going to be distributed proportionally to the surplus votes. And the surplus votes, I want to say it's 7%, but I'm not 100% certain because I don't remember the numbers I wrote down. Doesn't matter though. So here we see numbers distributed. So some Jim voters' second choice, or the Jim voter second choice broke out to a bit Ron and a bit Kim, and the Bob voter third choice broke out to Amy, and that's how that worked out. As you can see here though, we still only have one winner, so now the next largest loser, Amy, is eliminated and her voters are distributed to their next choice. Her voters and the Don voters who ranked Amy next overwhelmingly prefer Kim, so they almost all go towards Kim. Now Kim is over the threshold, so her voters are distributed to their next choice. Oh, skipped a bit ahead there. I didn't make a next image because, yes, the voters are distributed to the next choice, but we also now see there's only 3 candidates left, Jim, Ron, and Kim. So the election is done. Some quantity of the surplus votes are going to go to Ron. Ron actually won't cross the threshold, but since there's no other candidates left, he wins. So he's the third winner. And that is how a STV election works. If you have any questions related to that, or you want a more detailed rundown, or you want one with actual numbers, because I didn't put any numbers on this because, frankly, they don't actually matter. Mind you, I do actually have the numbers for this. I just didn't write it because I thought it would make the screen more cluttered. Apologies. But if you have any questions or you want more information, just comment below, and I will do that. And if addendum video, make a footnote or something. Now, let's compare this to IRV. So you will note I did not actually run through I'm not actually going to run through the 14 criteria because this system, being a derivative of instant runoff voting, has all of the same answers to those 14 criteria that IRV does. Now you might ask yourself, well, why doesn't this get the exact same tier as IRV? And if it does get the exact same tier, why are you making a different video for it? What's the point? Well, the answer to that is it doesn't get the same tier. I'll go into that momentarily, but I guess that's a bit of a spoiler since IRV is F tier. But why is that? So the fact that STV has multiple winners reduces a lot of my issues with IRV, which is the quantity of strategic voting required in it, trying to figure out how the candidates are going to work. And it also reduces the flaws of IRV because, yes, STV still does not satisfy monotonicity, consistency, or participation criteria, but since it has multiple winners, it's much less likely that any individual voter is going to suffer from any of those. Now, I don't want to say this categorically, but I'm fairly certain it is close to impossible for participation to be invalidated in STV. It's not strictly impossible, i.e. participation being if you vote for a candidate. So, voting for a candidate as opposed to not voting could cause someone to lose. That is technically possible in STV because it doesn't satisfy participation criteria. But since it's a multi-winner district, it is so much harder for that to actually occur that this becomes a rare, devastating flaw to like an almost unthinkable occurrence. So it brings, basically, just to sum this up, the fact that you've now made this a multi-winner district removes it mitigates almost all the flaws of IRV, and it takes it from a absolutely awful system that no one should ever use to being an acceptable system. Now, that is not to say STV does not have downsides. The first one, and the main one, is that the number of candidates is just farcical. In the example of New South Wales, 2019 Senate election in Australia, which uses STV, STV is actually a used system, in case you're not aware, there was 109 candidates by my count. I might have miscounted, but there was 109 candidates. I believe it was 6 seats being contested. Yes, it was 6. And I will admit I did not do an exhaustive analysis of every single district and every single STV election, but this is illustrative of what STV is going to look like. Because in the case of Australia, all the major parties had 6 candidates, and then you had a whole plethora of small parties who fielded some candidates. In the case of, let's say, Canada, because I'm Canadian and familiar with that, assuming an adoption of STV doesn't change anything about our political system, our party system, I should say. So we still have the same skew of parties. What you would see is likely in a normal district that is 5 candidates, 5 Conservatives, 5 Liberals, 5 NDPers, 5 Greens, 5 People's Party, and then a large quantity of other parties. Independents, random people, because keep in mind, in this district you only need 20% of the votes to win. Now this district would normally be created by merging a bunch of small ones, so let's picture PEI for a second. Merge all 4 districts of PEI as just PEI district. It has 4 winners. Technically speaking, the difficulty of winning is approximately the same as it was before. But if you have a very loose support, such as the NDP, you are more likely to actually win seats because the NDP has a very flat support. It has very similar support in a region across every single riding for the most part. There's some places like Lower Mainland BC or downtown Toronto or Hamilton where they have a much stronger support, but in general, they're more flat. So the difference from riding to the next riding is not much. So because of that, a lot of people and a lot of parties that have a decent amount of support, but it's too thin to win any single first-past-the-post district, have a chance of actually winning a seat in an STV district. So you get more candidates running. And additionally, because the multi-winner aspect of STV reduces IRV's or first-past-the-post spoiler effect, though I will note the spoiler effect still exists in STV. It is just less than IRV, which is a cataclysmic amount of spoiler effect. And if you don't believe me, comment below and I can explain it to you, or you can watch the previous video on it, or if that video doesn't doesn't satisfy you, you can comment on that one, and I can just do my best to explain it or make an addendum video. So, that all said, you are going to see a lot of candidates. And also, the way the election works is fairly complicated, so it's not impossible to explain to people. Obviously, places like Ireland and Australia do use it. It's just more complicated to explain to people. And you have a lot of candidates, so it makes the actual vote more complicated. Because then you have to try to figure out not only, and again, using Canada example, do you like the Liberals, Conservatives, NDP, Green, Bloc, People's Party, whatever the other parties exist. But then you also have to consider, okay, there's 5 Bloc candidates. Which Bloc candidate do I like the best? It's very complicated. It's not impossible. Obviously, plenty of people do. There's many countries that do use this system. It's just more complicated, which is generally demerit. But that said, let us go to tier list time. It gets a solid spot in B tier here. It's better than both runoff and instant runoff, even though effectively it's the same system. But the fact that you've made it multi-winner takes all of the negatives of any flavor of runoff voting and has reduced them. Mathematically, it still has those same flaws, but practically, they are much less likely to occur, so it is a much less significant problem. Now, you might argue that it should have a higher ranking because it's more proportional. Now, I would not necessarily say you're wrong, but I personally do not think the proportionality of an electoral system is a quality that you strive for. If you get it, that's great. Cool. But it's not a quality it needs to satisfy, if that makes sense. Like, picture you are getting a grade on an exam, on a course that's very hard. You don't need the A on it. You just need a passing mark on your exam. If you get an A, that's great. Cool. But it's not a requirement. It doesn't make it a bad... You don't do bad on the test because you didn't do the best you could, if that makes sense. Now, that's maybe not the best analogy in the world, but it's kind of hard to come up with an analogy for this, to express my personal opinions on it. And if you disagree, feel free to comment below. I'm not the sole saying of what is the best systems in the world. This is largely my opinion. It is based off of objective mathematical criteria with consideration of specificities of the system. And that has to be, I have to have some, what's the word for it? Considerations of intricacies of the system, or else IRV, runoff, and STV would effectively have to get the same ranking because they're all mechanically, mathematically, more or less the same system. The only difference is multi-winner. And I guess, in this case, only 2 rounds occur in this one. So, generally speaking, my opinion on proportional systems is that proportionality of an electoral system is not a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It is just a thing. It happens, and it changes the character of a nation's political system. But I do not think it makes it better or worse, for reasons I outlined in the first past the post video, so I'm not going to get back into here. Though, if enough people comment and they don't like my answer from the first past the post video, I could do an addendum video in this series addressing that. That said, I don't really feel the need to drag this on any longer. So if you like the video, by all means, like it. Comment below any thoughts on the video. If you disagree with how I'm ranking any of the systems so far, if you disagree with my reasoning or my criteria, or if you'd like to see a particular voting system, or you want to see more examples, or just anything you want to say. I love reading all the comments. They're all wonderful. And even the ones when you throw hate mail at me, it's great. I get a good chuckle. With that said, though, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will just like to iterate again. There is going to be a live stream tomorrow at 7 Eastern Time to 10 Eastern Time. The format of this is going to be, there's going to be at the start, we're going to have a few segments that myself and Lexie will be discussing, and then we will go into questions and discussion if people have any questions or discussion. By all means, save them up and think about them. Otherwise, I will see you tomorrow.